Okay, we're going to record this. Welcome, everyone. I am Dr. Nicole Kamak. I am a licensed clinical psychologist, and I am president and CEO of Black Mental Wellness. For those of you who may not be familiar with Black Mental Wellness, we are a corporation of licensed clinical psychologists, and we really got together to shift the narrative as we think about mental health in the Black community, specific and very heavy on Black. Part of our work is doing programs like this. So we want to be able to, when we think about mental health, it's not just what happens in the therapy room, but it's bringing conversations like this to the community. And being able to collaborate with those who are doing the work in a range of different ways. And so we are so excited to have this conversation for Men's Mental Health Month, and to have this conversation led by men. So you all are in for a good discussion. So tonight, well, I want to just give you a little bit of history. Part of how we started Brother to Brother, we started in 2020 with our first annual conference that we do. Next date will be October 24th. I hope to see some of you there. But part of that conversation is if we want to talk about men and mental health, then we needed men to lead the conversation. And that was the first time that we did Brother to Brother. It is a session that we have at our conference each year. And then it is something that we started doing in June as well, where we can bring the conversation outside of the conference space. So I am thankful for the men that you see on this panel today who have a range of experiences, and expertise and lived experiences too that they are happy to share with all of you. So really quickly, I am going to do a brief intro and then I'm going to join the audience in listening to this dynamic conversation. But first, I want to open it up to our moderator, who is Philip Wilkerson. Sorry. He is an employer consultant at GMU Career Services. And in this role, he connects employers with the George Mason University community. So part of his role is to provide students, faculty, staff, and alumni with career opportunities. He oversees industries including media, entertainment, journalism, public relations, graphic design, sports and recreation, hospitality and tourism, and technology and engineering. Philip was nominated as the National Association of Colleges and Employers Mentor of the Year in 2024 and has been recognized with awards such as GMU's Employee of the Month, the ALX Chamber 40 Under 40, and the Pillar Award for his support of Black students. He serves as the faculty advisor of the Iota Alpha chapter of Alpha Phi Alpha Fraternity Incorporated and the GMU NAACP chapter. In his free time, he hosts Positive Filter, a podcast focused on well-being and personal growth. Welcome, Philip.
I mean, I still get embarrassed when everyone does that. I was like, please don't. But I also transparently, I think we should start off with a moment of silence for Kyle Coleman, the young man that passed away. I felt a lot of connection, particularly in this month. Being a Jack and Jill kid myself, and growing up in Northern Virginia. So let's just take a quick moment of silence for Kyle Coleman and his family during this time. Okay, thank you. I just felt like that, we're talking about mental health, and that was something that was on my heart and my mind. Uh, and then I think he was like, we're talking about Black men mental health, and I'm pretty sure everyone's here is like, what is my experience? But I did get my degree in counseling, and I felt like that set the tone for me in my life to have these vulnerable conversations. So, I think if it wasn't for me actually getting a master's in counseling, I don't think I would be in the place that I am today. And so, with that being said, I want to introduce our various panelists. I want them to introduce themselves. And when they introduce themselves, your name, but then also I want you to say, what does mental health mean to you? So it's almost like an elevator pitch, meaning like you say your name, what you're doing, and then what does mental health mean to you? I'm going to start with the youngest to oldest. And so we're going to start with our young man, Rip. Rip, introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about what mental health means to you.
All right. Hello, everyone. My name is Rip Cornish. I currently attend the University of Maryland, College Park as a upcoming junior, majoring in business marketing. And what I do for mental health and why it means so much to me is because of the community that I came from. where I come from, mental health was never talked about. A lot of trauma from gun violence to just things happening in our community where there were no outlets. These things were normal, and it was a cycle, and that cycle ultimately broke down my community. And this journey all began at the age of 13 when I realized this need and I started advocating through speaking. And now I am 20 years old, 7 years later, and I'm doing that same thing because I know that it's not only my generation who needs it, but older and the generation that's coming after me. So what mental health means to me is community. It means impact. It means making sure that the brother or sister that is next to me is okay and that they know that it's okay not to be okay.
I love that. I love that. Thank you. See, you set the tone. I knew to start with the you first. I already know. I think Q is the youngest out of here. If not, you still got a baby face. Brother Anderson, tell us a little bit about yourself and
So,
what mental health means to you.
what's going on, everybody? I'm Hugh Anderson. I'm from Richmond, Virginia. Currently, right now, I am a LCSW supervisee, mental health therapist in the Richmond and Chesterfield community. I just want to say it's an honor and privilege to be before you guys, and thank you guys for the invitation to share. For me, I would say mental health to me is having the means of having the emotional and psychological strength to face life's challenges while still being able to experience the joy, purpose, and connection. Mental health is important to me because I've seen firsthand how untreated anxiety and depression can affect relationships, your self-worth, and ability to function day to day. So that's why I was trying to encourage people to have some type of outlet, some type of coping mechanisms that are positive to make sure that you're managing life's day-to-day stresses. Because even the good word, the Bible says, regardless in life, regardless of class and status, where you're uh, upper class, middle class, lower class, everybody going to experience trials and tribulations. So we need to make sure that when we experience those challenges, we're still able to keep ourselves balanced and centered as much as possible. So that's what mental health means to me.
Thank you. I love it. And I appreciate it. I'm writing notes too because I know that I'm going to come out of this conversation very inspired. And so they're dropping gems already. I think I appreciate it. Also, I'm just going to make a large assumption. Black don't crack. Uh, Brother James, you look pretty young to me. So I think we're doing the youngest to oldest. And so we're gonna have Dr. Hines and Lewis fight for the last part. But let us know a little bit about yourself and what does mental health mean to you.
Absolutely. Thank you. Thank you for that. My name is Kirk James. I am a resident in counseling, completing my clinical residency in the Hampton area. Um, Originally from Mount Vernon, New York, but just came out here to finish my residency. The question was to state is like, what does mental health mean to me? In simplest terms, it's breaking the silence. As men, as people do, when we keep mental health in discussion, we are breaking the stereotypes, the cultural barriers, the societal norms that tell us that we shouldn't behave or act in this particular way. It's finding comfort and joy in discomfort settings. And you can only do that when you're breaking the silence. So I appreciate the 46 people on this call right now that is being open to breaking the silence tonight and having an intentional and curated discussion surrounding men's mental health. Spaces like this are not curated enough for us. So I appreciate Black Mental Wellness for curating this space just for men who identify as Black, to discuss things that we all naturally go through, things that are normal and things that are not normal, and feel seen, supported, and heard in this sacred and trusted space.
I appreciate that. And so for those out there in the comments, please let us know where you're tuning in from. Throw your connection, throw your LinkedIn in the chat. Obviously this is a space, but there's also a space for community and connection afterwards. So I always tell people throw stuff in the chat. Also, if you have some questions, throw them in there as well. I think Nicole or someone can ping me or make sure that I get to your questions because I like this to be a dialogue and I want your input. I saw Dr. Hines. He came off mute, so I think he's already ready anyway, or assuming his age. But Dr. Hines, you can go next and tell us what mental health means to you, as well as introduce yourself.
I will say for the record, Brother Forrest, that he is younger than me for the record. So I'll say that I was volunteering ahead of time. Good evening, everyone. First, thank you, Phil and Nicole, for hosting this space tonight for Men's Mental Health Month, particularly for Black men. My name is Eric Hines. I'm a professor at George Mason University in the counseling program, and my research focuses on the academic and career outcomes of Black men and boys. Also, look at how do we get more Black students and students of color into careers that are around science, technology, engineering, and mathematics. So for me, mental health is really being able to know how to manage your emotional, social, physical, and psychological well-being, particularly in the times of stress. Also, as Black men, knowing how to have boundaries and understanding what you are in control of, and also focusing on what matters. I think sometimes we feel like we have to take on the world or take care of everybody, but there's only so much to go around of us. And I also believe that it means that you should be able to communicate, or we need to communicate what it is that we need in order to make sure that we are well. Also want to talk about too, as I thought about this panel, being able to make sure that we can teach young boys and young men about mental health as well, so that they'll understand how to get the resources and the help that they need to make sure that they engage in healthy behavior. So that is what mental health means to me.
I appreciate that, Dr. Hines, and you're doing great work. And then last but not least, Mr. Forrest, please tell us a little bit about yourself and what mental health means to you.
Yeah, thank you, Phil, and Dr. Hines, thank you for being so gracious in that age projection. But good evening, everybody. My name is Louis Forrest. I also work at George Mason. I'm an administrator at Mason. I'm a former school counselor, worked in a high school as a high school professional counselor for many years, and I'm currently in a certificate program um, pursuing my LPC in mental health counseling. So I'm back in the classroom. So for all of you that are working through coursework, I am with you on that. So what mental health means to me, I really believe it's how we really think about how to take care of ourselves across many dimensions, many areas. Really figuring out what works for you. Um, Taking some time to step back and, like many of the folks have said already, what brings you joy, where are areas where you have some support and have challenge. How do you best ask for help when you need it, and to be able to prioritize those things in your life so you can wake up every day and be the best version of yourself. So there's a lot that goes into it. It's a lot of work, but I think having panels like this are wonderful because you get to be in conversation and maybe take some things out that you're working on, or make connections with people that can possibly help you get to the place where you want to get to.
I love it. And, you know, it's funny. I was like, I draw and write a lot, and I see themes in our conversation. And I think one uniting theme that I saw through a lot of the answers was this concept of community. And over this weekend, I learned, or I heard of a phrase called Ubuntu. It's an African phrase that says, "I am no, I am what I am because of who we are." So that thought of community. And so, Rip, I think you already started off with that about the importance of community. You said that mental health is community. And so when you hear that phrase, I am what I am because of who we are, what does that mean to you? And how does this tie in to mental health?
That's definitely that's a very deep phrase. I am who I am because of who we are. Um, I am who I am, exactly that, because of who we are, and in the mental health space, the things that I seen, and the in the environment that I grew up in, it wasn't a lot of mental health outlets, like I stated. It was a lot of violence, and kids my age, again, older, younger, didn't know how to speak or how to go to somebody, so they internalized that pain and took it out on their communities. Um, One of those people, I close to me, I lost to gun violence and those kind of things because they didn't have those outlets and they didn't know where to go or where to turn to. Um, and I am who I am, again, because of who we are, simply for the fact of a community that needed help but didn't know how to ask for it. And for somebody who was able to identify this problem and be an advocate for it in this space is everything. So it's like the upbringing might have not been so cohesive, but in a way, it was like that for change in order to happen. And so I am a product of of losing friends to gun violence, of not having those or knowing those outlets to mental health. That is what I am a product of. That is what we are a product of. But in turn, that is also the reason why I'm here. So that is so. Thank you for that quote. It's much deeper than just that because it's in perspective. So many stories out there.
And then, before we got on, even you said, Rip, you're like, wow, this is the first time I've seen so many Black men that are in the profession or have a, degree in mental health. And then, Brother Anderson, you said earlier, is like, I was the one male in your uh, undergrad program and a few Black men. And so, thinking about that community, what are the tolls of isolation on Black men well-being? Thinking about being the only in certain spaces. And then you talked about uh, having coping mechanisms. What would be one positive coping mechanism to address those feelings of isolation that can probably lead to anxiety and depression?
Sure. I think to speak on there earlier, what you're talking about, I was the only male in my undergraduate social work program, and then one of two Black males in my master's program in social work. And I think ultimately it comes down to people feel isolated because of the simple fact they feel like nobody sees them or hears them. And a lot of times people internalize that and think that I'm not of good self worth value to that point. I think one way to come out of that aspect is to one, have a good support system around you. You have to have good social supports. I think people usually when they have a problem, they stay sheltered to themselves because they want nobody to know their business. But you have to have a good safe space for at least one or two good friends or family members or mentors or even mental health professionals that you can actually lobby and talk to see what's going on. I think ultimately, as a Black man, we've been taught to see our forefathers and mentors to always harbor all their emotions internally, which occasionally starts to make us rock from the inside out. So the goal is ultimately to really talk and discuss what's really going on. It's okay to share and say, hey, I'm having a bad day. But when people feel like they don't have that community support system, it makes them want to just retreat to themselves. And it can be hard to get out those dark corners and spaces in their life. But it's always good to have good social supports. And honestly, when you don't have a good social support, that's a beautiful opportunity to discover who you really are. What do you like? What do you enjoy? Do you like going out to the movies? Do you like the journal? Do you like the rap music or do anything? You have to have found some type of positive outlet that can help get you out of your shell to the point you are able to express yourself so that you won't be in those dark places isolated.
I appreciate it. And I think that you think the one, I love words. Words have power. When you said rot, and that was a very powerful word, rot from the inside out, when you hold on to that. And I've, been reading a lot and I heard of John Henryism. Has anyone else heard that? That says that Black men are uh, having hypertension and because they're holding on to stress, kind of like how John Henry worked himself to death. And so when you hear about this hold on feeling and this internalization that leads to concurrent health stuff, right? And you're hearing about the old heads that held it in together and how that worked out for them. What are some thoughts? I see some people shaking heads when you hear about that. How about Kirk? What do you think about when you hear about rotting from the inside out or holding on to stress and not having a positive outlet as a Black man?
Yeah, I thank you for that question. I think of just like emotional suppression comes to mind, right? It's the stuff that's rotting inside, the stuff that's distasteful to society, to maybe my girl or my family or my friends or my work environment, right? It's the things that I don't want them to see because if I do show these, I have been taught or conditioned that I'm existing outside of the norm of a typical Black man. So if I'm showing signs of like sadness or um, um, sadness or fatigue or just any different moment feelings that's not related to like being strong or masculine presenting, then I'm putting myself into a different category. And nobody wants to be, in a different category, be seen as other, right? So what we tend to do is keep those feelings inside, and thus those feelings tend to rot. Then it goes to experiencing other mental health challenges. Along with emotional suppression also does come with numbing behaviors. So to fuel and feed the rotting sensation, as my brother just mentioned, is I start to lie about engaging in lionizing behavior about how I feel. So I mask or minimize the reality, the weight of what I'm experiencing. I start to engage in fornication or different exposures to things to escape the weight of what I'm experiencing. I utilize drinking and substance use to rely into that comfort of that support from there, because we're not getting support in other spaces, right? Rather than understanding this as a deeper level of pain that a lot of men go through. A lot of men are not in spaces where they have the comfort level to express themselves fully to someone and transparently. It's like Rip just said too, based off of people's experiences, it really shapes their future. So if somebody grew up with a conditioned mindset of like men don't cry, they're going throughout life with that same mentality. And it's until we're in spaces that challenge our conditioned behavior, we don't know how to navigate through it. So we do what's comfortable for us, and it's keeping that rotting, that ugliness, or those intense and difficult emotions inside.
Yeah, and it's really powerful because I think in like not only the power of holding on to stuff, but you brought up another word about masking and put it on facades. And so, a lot of these are going to come from personal conversations I had with each of you individuals. But Dr. Hines, I remember we talked about masking professionally and having to always show up. And I remember we talked about this. You shared a new thing with me. I never heard of it called uh, "I'm going to show them" syndrome, or what is it?
The prove them wrong
Prove them wrong. I'm
syndrome.
gonna prove them wrong syndrome, and how technically for a while that could have been a positive fuel, but I would say at a certain point it tipped over, and now it's becoming a rot. But talk about this this masking, and maybe not so necessarily always showing up, like masking in the professional space and that toll on black men, or masking in sports. Just the fact of masking and that toll, and this always this uh, achievement mindset that I always had to be, you know, presenting as stoic and perfect, or not perfect, but I meant like, not vulnerable,
Hmm.
and that
Hmm.
toll on black men.
Well, Ellis Coase, who is the author of the book entitled "The Envy of the World on Being a Black Man in America," said being a black man in America has never been easy. So, with that being said, a lot of the mask comes from us not wanting to show vulnerability, always feeling like we have to be perfect because we all know, think about our respective workspaces. If we get one thing wrong, then automatically some of our colleagues, our white colleagues, may think we don't know what we're doing, that we might be incompetent, that we got the job based on affirmative action. When in actuality, I could probably guess the majority of us brothers in here had to work twice as hard and studied twice as hard to get to where we are. And on some levels, we have more knowledge than some of our white colleagues. And we sit there and like, what? And then they get the benefit of the doubt while we always get questioned. So the mask really comes from, hey, I don't want to be, exposed, or this imaginary thing about being exposed. I say imaginary because part of what we need to do as black men is show up in the space authentically and being ourselves. It's okay to make mistakes. It's okay to not get everything right. We're human. Um, and in that space, I want to say that not only being human, but also we're also fragile. We're also susceptible. Not That's not saying don't come and not know what you're talking about, but I think when we come and being authentic, off being our authentic selves, let me say that 3 times, we're able to not only feel comfortable in the space, even though the space may be toxic, the space may not want us there, but at the same time, our confidence level and then believing in ourselves is what helps us become resilient in those spaces. I think that's the bigger key when we talk about the mask. The mask really brings on the stress. You talk about the John Hearingism. Nobody should be trying to power through their job, particularly Black men, because powering through ends up making you have signs of depression, mental breakdown, and then you're going home when you should be focused on your family, focus on yourself, focus on your hobbies. You're thinking twice, oh, did I say that right? Did I do that right? Did such and such, they said this. They said, oh, you're very smart to be from an HBCU. Well, what did that really mean? So we have to come and we have to be okay with how others feel about us because we can't control that. What I say for young Black men, I used to run a live and learning community for Black males at my former institution. And I used to say, hey, you got to be yourself because if you don't be yourself, it's going to break you down. And your focus of being in school and doing well is going to be consumed by what other people think about you. Control the controllables. I got that from a conference from a young man and his father. They were talking. If you can't control what people think, control your work, control your output. You might be at the table. They may talk about you at the table, but be the thing that they talk about that's juicy and tasty. I'm going to be that turkey that they're going to eat and they're going to focus on. They may not like me, but they cannot deny me. So when you talk about that math has to go because Black men have a lot to contribute and bring to the table. In fact, if I talk to the majority of you now, you're probably holding up your institution or where you work at as opposed to some of your other colleagues. So that mass piece, I think, is critical because if we prove ourselves right, then we don't have nothing to prove to anybody else because we know what we could bring to the table, regardless of what other people think.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I love it. Friend, do you have a question or you raise your hand?
Yeah. First of all, good evening, gentlemen. I think this forum is great. It's interesting that I just did a round of interviews for a position. I got the job. But one of the things that I said in my second interview is I don't feel like I have anything to prove. I feel like I have a lot to display. And I said that if you did not feel that I was qualified for the job, I'd never be sitting here in the first place. I was like, but I always try to take and retain power of myself. And I said, this is a great company. I would love to work here. I was like, but I'm not going to show up every day as if I have to prove to you who I am. I will display to you who I am. And from that, you'll be able to take your cues. But I will never show up and feel and allow you to think that your employment or the money that I get from this company is going to put me on a path. You're part of my journey. And if this company is not for me, then that's okay. But I will come in and I will display Frank, but I will never have to prove him.
I love Frank dropping John. He's going to drop a bar on us and then just, lead that. I wrote that down. I might have to use that. I'm on display. I don't have to prove anything. And, I think one thing that also has been really instrumental in my individual mental health is, see it and achieve it. The power of mentorship, the power of those maskless spaces. And so I want to give a shout out and give the flowers to what is due. My man, Mr. Forrest right here, Mr. Lewis Forrest, has been a great mentor to me and as a person to allow me to lower my mask. And I want to give you the flowers now publicly, but also wanted to ask, what is the important, like you're all about well-being and the holistic viewpoint. And so to this question, when you think about the holistic picture of a Black man and all the different parts that we say we can be well, and talk about Mason stuff, the Mason choose kind of all that. What does that mean, the holistic wellness for Black men and not just, one aspect? We're talking about mental health, but how they intersect with each other, the other, we call pillars of wellness or well-being.
Well, first, I want to say, Phil, it's been equally as fruitful for me to be your friend and have that relationship with you, because I think folks who see us, Phil and I, present together and be on committees together and lead in a lot of different spaces. We've sent a signal exactly about what Dr. Hines was saying and exactly about what Mr. Caldwell was saying, how we just we just show up as who we are, and then we display what we think is for the good of our work and for the good of our community. So Phil, you know how I feel about you on that front.
Yeah.
Um, as far as well-being is concerned, I think it's important to look at all the facets of who we are. There's a as men, as humans, people, we hold a lot. And it's oftentimes not just enough to look at my physical well-being. It's not just enough to look at my financial well-being. We have to invest in ourselves and take a little step back and figure out what do I need? Because I think sometimes we throw around the word like holistic, to be whole. Like, what does that really mean? Like, what parts of me are do I feel like I'm okay? And where are the parts where I need help? Where are the parts where I need Phil? You know, need folks to help me button up things emotionally. Do I have folks that I can talk to? If I don't have a handle on my financial well-being, who can I talk to that maybe knows more than me? Right. So I think when you think about well-being, it is about a lot of things, but you have to figure out, to me, you have to figure out what works best for you. Because I think what one person might think is holistic well-being, it might look different for me just because I'm a different person. I grew up differently. I have different aspects of my life that are important. The spiritual aspects, the community aspects, all the things that make me me. I oftentimes we have to sit down and figure out what those things are. You know, it is so easy to look at other people and say, man, that person's they done lost 15 pounds. They looking good, right? And but we don't know what's happening behind the mask, right? We don't know they might be struggling in other areas. So not to play this competition game around our well-being, but to look at ourselves and do some sort of inventory around where we might need some assistance, where we might need some help, might need somebody to sit down and talk to. I think, Brother Anderson, you talked about that. Who do you have in your circle? Who's on your team that you can talk to really give you some relief from some of the weight that we hold on a daily basis? So, well-being, that term gets thrown around a lot, but it takes some intentional time to sit down and figure out what that formula means for you. Where are the areas where I need to pay a little more attention so that I can be the best person I need to be, not the perfect person I need to be, the best that I can be day to day. Because work, home, all those things impact how we show up. And so we have to take as much time with that as we do lots of other things that sometimes distract us from taking care of ourselves.
Yeah, and I think I'm picking all these things from that I see these patterns in my head. And one thing you said was this competition of my well-being is not the same as someone else's well-being. And and then I just looked straight at Rip, and I'm thinking about the young people where there's this exacerbated sense of comparison. And I don't know if it's social media or whatnot, and the how we have to compare, we don't know what people are really going through. And so, Rip, as a young man, how do you find your joy for yourself without all the noise I'm assuming that younger people are facing, and the comparison of others in taking away your individual joy as a young black man?
Yeah, that's a very real thing. Growing up in this generation, you look online, you look on social media, and you see so many people achieving so many things, and you're like, "Oh, why am I not that far?" Or "Why haven't I gotten that?" And sometimes you forget that your paths aren't the same, and that they may have started earlier than you. They may have more access to you. You may have to go a different route, and when you forget those things, that is what can steal your joy. That is what can steal your happiness, but it's only when you focus on your route, on your pace, on the things that you have to do. That is when you find that joy. That is how I found my joy. Because as a human, being a human, I often found myself comparing myself, and it was only when I looked back on my journey and I went at my own pace, And I really locked in on my vision and realized where I came from, who I am, what I come from, and why I am here. That is when my joy was solidified, and ultimately how I keep going in this world of social media and with so many people and having so many things going on in front of me.
Yeah, see, you already wise. You already had a, you're already doing big things. Look at that. That's a wise thing to think about. And then, Brother Anderson, say the word social work. And so I'm thinking in my mind, the systemic issues that infiltrate. We did a lot of individual, but this is also a systems issue. And you probably see that when you studied social work, probably part of that was society. So, like, what are some of the things when you think about the effect of macro systems on the well-being of Black men that just comes to mind, or you think about, whether it's the education system or policies, whatever, what do you think about, and how can both mental health clinicians, also just everyday people, address some of those systemic issues?
Oh, that's a good question. I'm also a former educator as well. And when you asked that question and you said background, I think about the school system. I think a lot of times with our students, um, from an early age on, like Rip said, like you exposed to so much trauma and violence. Majority of the population when I was teaching, there was the schools center around pretty much the projects. So you talking about kids, fall asleep in class all day. And the average teacher, would try to get on them, but when you talk to that student one-on-one, you learn he was sleeping in class all day because he didn't get no sleep last night. And he didn't get no sleep last night because he was up protecting his mom and little brother because they were shooting outside his window. So you talking about the systemic of these kids really dealing with some real deal issues. So we'll get to the fact that they're in a single parent household with their mother. They don't have a father figure or even a father in the picture. So they deal with all these
Mhm.
crucial situations going on that's affecting their education. I think and again, most of the time, we have school social workers, but school social workers, if they don't really get to do too much with kids. The most they'll do is drive by the house, knock, knock, can't come to school. After that, they doing child stud meetings and this, that, and there. They not really get the chance to really focus on the real mental health issues that these students are really dealing with. So I think we need to have more outside agencies to partner with school systems, which I know most do. But if that most of the agencies that are getting to the school system don't look like us. So we need to find more agencies that these school systems can actually know that these kids can talk to that look like them and actually experience these particular things. So when you asked that question, I really meant immediately to the school system on that level because we need to support our students and not just Black students, but actually the Latino community, especially with this president we have an offense who was doing all this crazy, mass deportation, and all these babies just left here trying to figure out where's my mom and my daddy. Think about all the trauma and the built up energy that they have and the loneliness they're experiencing. We need somebody to help these people share their outlet and get them the help and support they need. And I think if we have these partnerships and allow, the offices and mental health specialists come into the school system to help our students, I think they'll really build a bridge to make sure that we're taking care of our Black and brown community.
Yeah, and then one thing I thought about too, I don't know if it's chicken or the egg, right? But you're like, uh, we need more people to get into those spheres. But then, like, some people don't even know this is an occupation that you can get into. Like, I kind of, be honest, I fell into my master's of counseling. I didn't have this track. I'm gonna grow up and be a counselor. I didn't. People think of firefighter and all that. I fell into it, and so, I want to ask a two-part question to Kurt: is how did you get into the mental health, profession? And two, why do you think there is this, like, this very visible, I don't even have to say anecdotal, gap of Black men practitioners in the space? Because then, the people that need services, you say, like, my wife, she's white. There's mostly white women social workers. That's say what it is. And so how do we, two-part question on that. Your experience, and then why do we see this gap in diversity in practitioners and support for mental health?
Yeah. Just thank you for those two questions. First and foremost, for me, I got into the mental health profession simply. I was a former educator at first. I got my undergraduate in family consumer science and literacy. I realized the need for me was more outside of the classroom. So I had some of those experiences that Anderson was mentioning about students showing up and why the performance level was so low. And I knew that during COVID there was a need outside of the classroom. Thus pursuing school counseling, but understood my reach as a school counselor, which then I wanted to move forward to just full on mental health services. I think a lot of times Black men in particular are not in this field. We are part of the 4% because we didn't have the same experiences of access. And what happens at home stays at home when it comes to mental health or experiencing certain challenges. So how can we be open to being in spaces when those spaces were not provided to us? For a few, we had mentors and role models who provided comfort and support for us through recreational activities and that sense of somebody being present for us and having that sense of hope and comfort and connection and representation sometimes does play a role into why many of the 4% of Black males become mental health professions as well. But for those who haven't had those experiences, we go into typical and not knocking anybody for their profession, but we go into typical professions that are for men, like construction or police work. And my brother is a police officer. My other brother is a firefighter. So those are more masculine presenting, male dominant careers. And for me, my experience was different from my brothers growing up. So that's why career choices were different. So just to share those two components.
Yeah, I mean, I think that it makes sense. Like I never, like I said, I never thought of this as occupation until exposure, and then you're like, oh, I could keep going. Dr. Hines, I always look at you like, how did you get into this? And then this is something that you just talked about a little bit. Well, you're saying for STEM education or STEM, but I do believe you're still also trying to increase the awareness of Black men in counseling professions too. So you can, that question for you as well, your background, and then the systemic issue of lack of Black male presence in the helping professions.
To be honest with you, I got into this profession because my junior high school, I'm dating myself, it's middle school now. I went to a junior high school, seventh, eighth, and ninth grade. My school counselor, he was Black. And the reason why I'll give you a quick backstory. I was floundering when I started community college. I didn't really take it seriously until my mother told me, okay, I'm pulling some of the purse strings back and I got a full-time job and I was working in a cubicle. And I said I hated working in a cubicle because the people I was working with at the time, I was making great money too. They just complained about their lives. So I just figured out one day, what is it that I was good at? So I was doing career development before I knew what it was. And so I thought about my school counselor, and he used to wave all this wads of money at us. Like, hey, he'll open his wallet. You can have this money if you went to college, if you go to school, you stay engaged. I was like, oh, yeah, let me do that. But also, I enjoyed working with children, and I also enjoyed at the time I was listening to this motivational speaker named Tony Robbins because I myself was feeling kind of depressed, not really happy about my life, but I found purpose in helping other individuals find their potential. So I went into school counseling. I went into education so that kids wouldn't be as disengaged as I was. So I didn't grow up in a harsh surrounding. I was a middle of the road kid. I wasn't uh, gifted or accelerated, and I wasn't at risk. So, for me, it was like, how do we engage those middle of the road kids, those maybe lower middle class, upper middle class? Because believe it or not, those kids, they have just as much issues as some of the kids that we would consider at risk, particularly if you're growing up in majority schools or white predominantly schools and upper middle class areas, and you're trying to figure out who you are, but people are saying, well, this is who you are. Extra. So I know I'm going off on a tangent, but with that being said, I got into the profession because it was for me a way to ensure that we can get kids to find their purpose through academics and through their career. And I taught Sunday school at the time as a young guy, and so I just enjoyed working with children. The other piece, when we talk about recruitment, I think it's just really about exposure and having those conversations. Right now, we talked about it earlier. One of our colleagues, Phil Lewis, brother Sam Steen, we have a mental health services grant that we're looking at partnering with Nova and a local school district where we are trying to expose more students to the counseling, particularly the school counseling profession. So I really think it's a conversation that we have to have. Oh, this is what school counseling is. This is what school counselors does. And I was a person in high school that swear that I wasn't working in a high school because I was terrorizing my teachers a little bit, not in a bad way. So I wouldn't do it. But here I am. I'm training the trainer, basically teaching master students how to be school counselors. So I think the conversation is about how do we see more of ourselves, Black men in school counseling or social work or mental health counseling, and how do we be in those spaces where we're in the community, or now we talk about Gen Z and even Gen Alpha putting more content online where we talk about school. This is the day in the life of a school counselor. This is what a school counselor does. This is what it takes to get to that profession, getting a bachelor's degree and then getting a master's or a specialist degree. So it's about different ways of, I believe, reaching students and help young people, and then helping them understand what it means to be a counselor, particularly in a school or career, higher ed, or clinical setting, et cetera.
First of all, I mean, I think it's a great story, but what was this man doing with wads of money? Like, I need to get that. Where is that money at for the counselor?
Well, he was a night school principal too. We had
He
night
was
school in
hustling
our
hard.
district, and then he was a school counselor.
Yeah, too.
So yes, so he was trying to just entice and say, hey, and that has to be the focus, right? What are we doing to engage students? What would it take to engage them? So thinking in ways of education. So yes, now education is a labor of love, but he also showed us secretly, having multiple streams of income, you could still be impactful and still do the work you want to do. So I
He showed
want to
us
put
the
that out
hustle.
there too, just in case people were questioning going into education. It's
Yeah,
still a wonderful field. For me, it's purpose.
he showed you the secret sauce. He was like, all right,
Yes.
you gotta have two jobs, which is okay. You gotta have a side hustle. I think
Yeah.
yeah, we have about 10 minutes, so I want to make sure I get to this question, which is a very powerful question. We have in the chat, so whoever can answer wants it. How can spouses, partners, or family members help our men of color in their healing journey and help them in understanding that being a provider is not their only responsibility, right? Not just being a provider is their own, but a shared responsibility and partnership. I was just thinking, like, real quick, that, just understanding the non-monolithic view of a person, that there's multiple ways to be a provider, right? Like, obviously financially provide, but also emotionally provide. I think I saw a study and they said that honestly, the opposite of the narrative is incorrect, that Black men are more engaged with their children than their white counterparts, or like actually do more parenting, and there was like a study like they change diapers more than white men, whatever. And so I think some of that would be acknowledging that the responsibility of parenting and householding and house rearing is more than just financial. It's that holistic piece, and that it is a partnership. Um, I'll just say transparently, I thought before I got a job at Mason, I thought the only thing I was good at was being a dad. I was ready to do all that stuff because I felt my confidence in my fatherhood before my profession. So I think not allowing men, but celebrating men more for that part, I think would help. But what are some other issues of partners and family members? I just talked about partners and wives, but how can others outside of Black men help Black men in their healing journey?
I mean, I think I'll say quickly, I know we don't have a lot of time, but I think part of it is part one might be listening. If this is truly about healing, right, for that individual, what's at the core of that, right? What is their story? Why do they operate the way that they do? Someone to listen to that, if their spouse or they need some help with the listening part, because listening doesn't come easy for everybody. And so maybe they need a little bit of help with that. And then two, for me, it's asking the right question. Like, what does that person need? Do they even know or understand what the responsibility part of being a provider means? Like, we hold these words and definitions and think everybody holds them and understands them equally. They might not understand that part, or you might be hearing it differently. So it's part conversational listening. And then I've been married for 27 years, and collectively as a unit, you may not have all the answers. It may not be you it may not be a family member, it might be somebody that you trust, whether it's in the a faith space or someone a therapist or somebody that can help y'all walk through and understand what that provider role might mean and then what that person needs to get to healing, because you can't do all those things at once, right? So you have to take the steps. And so that may not be fully answering your question, but that might be some of the things, and I'll let other folks chime in.
Well, you did definitely and
Um,
trifecta real quick because he had a birthday, anniversary, and Juneteenth or whatever. He had three celebrations this weekend, so shout out to you. But yes, Brother Anderson.
Lewis said right here is really just being having a listening ear, but also too, I think one way that spouses and families can support is I'll go to this modality that I love to use, which is solution focused brief therapy, right? Which basically says, yeah, we can talk about the problem, but ultimately we need to find a solution. You want to vent to continue to hear about the problem, but you ultimately will get to the solution. One thing you don't want to do is to have the individual keep circling the problem over and over, and next thing you know, he's in a hamster wheel. So the best thing you can do is to be a listening ear, but also make sure you focus on the solution at hand and how we're going to get through this problem. Now, it may not be an overnight fix. Like I tell people about going to therapy. Therapy is not a sprint, it's a marathon. It is a constant process, and them being in there in that moment to help them with those problems to get to a solution is one of the best ways I feel that I do with my clients to help them not stay in that negativity mode, but to better so they be better.
Love it. Well, I think we have about 5 minutes and then we have five guests. So we're going to go in reverse order. And we're just saying, let's say someone did not come to none of this and you got to drop one gem, one line bar on them about mental health for the session today. What would that one gem be? I'm going to start with you, uh, Brother Anderson, if you're ready for your one bar,
Yeah.
1 minute mental health.
I think the biggest thing, make sure you constantly pay attention and tend to your mental health above anything and everything. Because one thing I realized that when you don't tend to your mental health, it can ultimately probably create a generational curse. What I mean by that is it will ultimately lead to you, one, doing substance abuse, excessive drinking, overspending, being in debt, and that's all due to you not paying attention to what's really going on inside. I love this call, and the title of it is You Good, Bro? We constantly got to make sure we check on our loved ones. And one thing I always tell my friends, check on your strong friends, because I know they're always strong, but sometimes your strong friends just need somebody just to check on from time to time. So I think that's the best thing I can say. Just make sure you just take care of yourself, how those outputs.
I love it. I love that meme where it was like God gives the strongest battle or the hardest battles to his soldiers. So stop giving me these battles. I'm tired. I love that. Uh, Brother Kurt, what would be your last, your jam if no one came and they only got 1 minute to hear you say something today?
Sorry, that's so broad.
That's what
I think for me is being as a DBT therapist, I think for me is just being mindful of what we feel, even when we can't name what that is, being aware of knowing that something is not right with what you're experiencing. And when we realize that something is not right, with something is like that ugliness or something is uncomfortable, paying attention to that. And the one part I want to say is too, I tell my clients all the time is that regardless of their lived experiences, regardless of anything that they're going through or past experiences, what you're feeling is valid. So don't let anybody ever dismiss or minimize or make minute to how you are feeling. It's because you are feeling it that makes it valid. That's it. Period. At the end of that is how you're feeling it. And if you're not one that can articulate that on your own, go to therapy. I think every black man needs to be in therapy, regardless of anything. Go to therapy, right? Be in a space with someone who can help you through some of the things that you are holding inside. And going to therapy as a black man, as a black male, is strength. Speaking about what's going on inside is a sign of strength and it's not a sign of weakness. And a lot of us need to dismantle that narrative of black men don't go to therapy or black men hold it in or be strong. Like dismantle that. Like stop living by societal norms and expectations and create your own.
I love it. And I love the part about, what you feel like sometimes is as simple as why is my stomach always hurting all the time? Why I always got headaches? You know, your body's telling these things. Why am I not sleeping? So listen to your body. That's a great point, and get help. Rip, young man, let us know what's a gym?
So, as a young mental health advocate, I would say that when going back to the question that you asked me about comparison and how that can be a thief of joy, is that along this mental health journey to realize that you are human, and that it's not a sprint, it's a marathon. And as you start to go deeper into just discovering and unpacking, that it's okay to take time and that's okay to breathe, because that's what that space is for you to feel safe and for you to talk and for you to work through that. So just in this generation and in this current time, to know that it is okay to take your time and to work through those things, because it is not a sprint, it is a marathon. This is real life and you are human. So that's what I would say for being my gym, and to just know that it is, again, okay not to be okay, and that therapy isn't a weakness, it's a strength, because at the end of the day it's going to make you healthier inwardly and outwardly, spiritually as well as mentally. So yeah, those are my dreams.
Uh, Mr. Forrest, what's yours? Yeah.
Yeah, I would just say the same type of investments we put into going to the gym, Planet Fitness, LA Fitness, whatever the thing is, put that same investment internally. Take care of ourselves and get the help when you need it. Find out who are the people around you that you trust. It doesn't matter if you're older, younger, whatever range you fall in, you find somebody that you trust that can get you the support that you need. And for those that either are struggling with mental health or know somebody that's struggling, like it's real. And so the narratives out there that it might be this or it might be that, these things are real. And so that's why I appreciate these type of forums, so we can talk about them and make sure folks have as much information and perspective as possible.
All right. And Dr. Hines, last but not least, and then we'll have some parting words from Nicole about the things that Black wellness is doing.
I would say, and this is twofold for Black men and then for others that have Black men and boys in their lives. Let go of the unrealistic expectations of what you think a Black man or a Black boy should be. On one hand, we want them to be strong, tough, have this armor. On the other hand, we want them to be vulnerable, communicate, and talk more. You can have both, but you can't just say, I need one or the other. So being able to create a space where they can be vulnerable, Black men and boys vulnerable to communicate, because only then will that healing journey starts, when they're able to talk about the things that they're going through, and there's no judgment there. There's what is it, positive regard there. So I would say we have to get rid of these unrealistic expectations, and be able to have Black men thrive in spaces where people will embrace them for who they are and not what they want them to be or who they think they should be.
Perfect, perfect. That was a great way to close us out. And then I'm gonna pass it over. And I think, there's a great conversation, but let us know, Nicole, how we can get more involved and the things that you're planning for Black wellness.
Black mental wellness.
Yeah, I was getting tongue tied, and then I was
I
like,
saw you. I heard you.
look, y'all saw that too. I was like, oh my gosh. Yeah.
First, I just want to say thank each and every one of you for offering your insights tonight and being able to show up and really add to this conversation. As you can see in the chat, people have a lot of takeaways from what you were able to give. And I strongly believe that this is how we shift how we talk about and think about mental health. When Black men hear Black men talking about mental health, your vulnerabilities, how do you cope with it? What are some things you've dealt with work or in your community, where you're from? That empowers people to tap into those vulnerable feelings for themselves and to open up. So this is how healing begins. So thank you each for sharing tonight. We are recording this session, and so we will send it out to everyone who was registered. We'll post it so you can come back to it, or feel free to share it with your network so that more people can get this good and solid information that was presented tonight. And then, as a part of Black Mental Wellness, we do a lot related to mental health. We do have an annual conference that is coming up on October 24th. This is our 6th year, second time having it in person. And again, one of the sessions that started with the first conference was Brother to Brother. So we will have that discussion at the conference as well. We also do these types of programs. And part of doing these, we like to have them free and open for the community, because this is a way to introduce people to mental health, to get them to talk about things and to learn. As you could see in the chat, there were so many resources. I was trying to click everything, y'all, to keep up and connecting with people. So again, thank you all. We do mentorship programs. So those of you that are at GMU, I'm like, we need to have a solid line, because we do a mentorship program where we connect students who are in mental health to mental health mentors in the field. And these are things that people are volunteering their time. So it's a range of fields. We give them didactics. They get to be a part of opportunities like this. So we need to connect on that. We have things where we work with ambassadors, people who are community advocates. That's how we got introduced to RIP. We spotlight people on our website because we really want to use our platform. And then we develop resources that are about mental health from a Black perspective, heavy on the Black. So we have a workbook that was published in 2023, Healing Racial Stress for Black Teens. So we're working. And when they say there's stigma in the Black community, we know that that's not true. People don't trust people who are not, they know the intentions, right? If we want to have these conversations, we know when we create the safe spaces, when we create opportunity for treatment that is culturally inclusive, when we have programs and opportunities for people to talk about mental health, that they feel safe and can be vulnerable, that people show up. And so thank you all again for tonight. This was a beautiful panel and a great way to celebrate. I mean, we have Juneteenth coming up. We have Men's Mental Health Month. So thank you all again. Good night, everybody.